Good afternoon, everyone. Just thank you so much for joining us today to learn more about the Master of Legal Studies program here at UCLA School of Law. I'm Mary Puzakowski. I'm the Assistant Director of Graduate Studies, and I'm joined by the Executive Director of the M.L.S program, Jason Fiske. I will soon turn it over to Jason, and he will introduce you to our incredible professors, our incredible faculty that we have here today. So all of our professors today, they all teach in our core curriculum courses. So in terms of the format of the M.L.S program, in phase one, you will take your core curriculum courses. So think public law, private law. And then in phase two, you will move into the specialization courses. And we offer about 8 different specializations that you can choose from. Today's faculty panel is part of our March live series. Next week, we will have our full-time and part-time student panel. So feel free to connect with us on our social media channels. You can find us at UCLA Law M.L.S. As we regularly post our upcoming information sessions, our student panels, our faculty panel, but we also spotlight our students and have student testimonials on there too. So we've also included a link in the chat function. So without further ado, I will now turn it over to Executive Director Jason Fiske and our incredible faculty. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you so much. And this is a fun panel for us because we get to really display some of our extremely talented faculty that you have, no matter what class you take at any point in the program. And so what you can expect from the panel today is they're going to be talking about their courses specifically, but also give you a little bit of a flavor of what the experience in the classroom will look like for you as a student, and also talk about a little bit about the flexibility of the classes and how it is built for, this program is built for working professionals, and how the professors do understand the audience that we have in the classes. And so if any of you at any point have questions that you'd like answered, whatever that might be, feel free to put it in the Q&A at the bottom. And at the end, we'll make sure to reserve some time to answer all those questions that you may have, whether that be about classes or specific questions to faculty or about the program in general. We're more than happy to help. The 3 professors that we have today are, as Mary mentioned, are all professors in that core curriculum, which is the first part of the program that you would take. And actually, Russell Kropkin is the vice dean and the founding faculty director of the program. And he actually has to jump over to another event soon thereafter. So we're going to start off right with him right at the beginning. And so starting with you, Russell, what was when you were leading the faculty in the development of this program, what were some of your goals and what were your thoughts as to the development of the core curriculum and what it will accomplish for students?
Really, the motivating idea was that legal education is something that is helpful in life, not just for lawyers, but for people in all kinds of different professions. And yet in the United States, historically, you've only been able to study law in a sophisticated kind of way if you are willing and able to invest 3 years of your life getting a JD degree. And so the idea of especially the idea of the whole program, but especially the core curriculum part of the program, is to try to give professionals in other fields a sophisticated understanding of law and how law works in our society and how to think about law in the way that lawyers think about law. In a relatively short amount of time, because as you know, of course, people in our program only have the equivalent of 1 year's worth of study time. It can be spread out for part-time students, but it's the equivalent of 1 year. And we devote approximately half of that to trying to give you this foundation in being able to think in a sophisticated way about law and understand really how law works, and be able to use that in your professional life and your personal life. So we try to do that. It's a lot of work. We try to give you a lot of knowledge in a short amount of time, but we try to be efficient about it. We try to take the things that we teach JD students and take out the stuff that's not as critical and give you the most critical ideas and concepts.
Thank you so much for talking about that. And so the next question I'll address to each of the faculty one by one. And we'll start with Russell again. This will be the last question for Russell before he has to jump off. The question is, tell me a little about your course specifically that you teach, and how your course is relevant for non-lawyers.
Yeah, so my course is called Private Law. And in this course, I try to give you sort of a conceptual approach to thinking about how law works, try to teach you the practice of legal reasoning, and at the same time, teach you some substantive law in property law, tort law, and contract law. So three areas of law that are all private law in the sense that it's law that governs how private individuals and entities relate to each other and their responsibilities to each other. Whereas Professor Rich, he'll talk to you next about public law, which is about how law governs the relationship between private individuals and entities and the government. Right. So I as I tell the students, my class is not for the faint of heart, because I'm covering three topics that are JD students. They get an entire course in each of those subjects. And about half of my courses is in the area of contracts, because that's going to be the most the thing that's going to be salient and relevant in day-to-day life of almost everyone in the course. But some understanding about how property law works and about how tort law works, I think, is also really important for everybody to be a successful professional and just a good citizen.
Fantastic. And before you leave, Russell, I actually have one more question for you. And so that's, we designed the program to have private and public law in your first semester. Tell me about the dynamics of those two classes and kind of why those are great two courses to start out with in our program.
Yeah, I think that really covers the waterfront for you, right? That all areas of law can be considered private law or public law. I mean, those are the sort of the two. That's one way of dividing up the world. There's for sure overlap between those two areas. It's not a hard and fast dividing line, but between my course in private law, if you take that in the same semester that you take Professor Rich's course in public law, you're going to have a really good foundation for everything else you study and for just things that come up in your professional and personal lives over the course of your career, many of which you won't even have any idea now. You might think that one particular area of law is really important to you with what you do right now, but in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you might be doing something totally different. So what I want is for after one semester, for you to have that foundation. Of course, there's tons to be built on that foundation, but at least you'll have a broad knowledge after having these two courses together, I hope.
Thanks so much for sharing, and also thanks for taking the time to share with our students today. We really appreciate your time. So next up is Peter, and Peter is the professor of the public law class, which, as Russell mentioned, would be in your first semester. If you end up doing two classes as a part-time student in your first semester, you take both these classes in the fall. And so with Russell doing the private law, Peter doing public law. There is a quick question that I'll just kind of knock out of the way before turning it over to Peter. And the question is, are these core courses tailored for Master of Legal Studies, or are they universal to JD students as well? And so the answer, the core curriculum is designed specifically for Master of Legal Studies students. There's only Master of Legal Studies students in these classes. It's when you get to the elective classes that you'd also be in the classroom with JD students as well as Master of Legal Studies. So Peter, same question. You talked about your class and how it's tailored for non-lawyers.
Yes, thank you, Jason. And so as Professor Korobkin was saying, public law really is a course which is complements, but also perhaps to some extent overlaps with private law. What we're really talking about with public law is the relationship of the individual to the government, to the state. And by the state means sort of more broadly the whole set of regulations and laws from the Constitution on down that deal with what individuals can and cannot do in relation to not only the government, but with each other. And so we think of the US Constitution as a very important document, but actually the Constitution has almost nothing in it. It's very spare. It's an outline. And so when we talk about constitutional law, which is about half of the course, we're really talking about the decisions of the United States Supreme Court in various areas of life, going from family law to the economy, to free speech, to criminal procedure, to all sorts of issues where your rights may be a question. And so what I try to do in the course is I try to give people a range of exposure to what the Constitution is and how it's interpreted, and then go beyond the Constitution to what states do with their own constitution. So we have a section on state constitutional law, which a lot of people aren't that familiar with, but may actually govern what they do in business or in private life, even more than the US Constitution. And then we have a large section on statutory interpretation. What is a statute? How is it interpreted? How is it applied? And because we're teaching people who are not necessarily going to be lawyers, there may be ways that they think about statutes which are a little bit different than the way a lawyer might think about them. And so talk about how law is effective, but also that law is not always the solution. There may be solutions in a personnel issue where there's a discrimination case under an anti-discrimination statute, where the solution is not necessarily found in the law, but is found in how the employer manages the situation vis-a-vis their particular employee. So I think it's a very exciting area of law, or sort of set of areas of law. And we do try to focus on the particular kinds of problems that students in the program will encounter in their work situations. So I have quite a few cases on business issues, employment issues, a number of cases involving entertainment regulation, where I bring in the FCC, some very major cases involving that, immigration, environmental law. We run the gamut in terms of the subject matter that we deal with.
Thanks so much. So next up is Aman, and Aman teaches the business law for non-lawyers class, a very popular class in our program. Now, that class is a spring semester class. So it would be in your second semester of the program, assuming that you're doing the program on a 2-year pace. And so you'd have the choice in the spring semester of either doing this business law for non-lawyers class or the American Dispute Resolution System class. But of course, many of our students do elect this class. So Aman, do you want to talk through your class and how it's relevant for non-lawyers?
Yes, thank you, Jason. So I build on what Russell and Peter teach you in the first semester, with specific application to business law. And I assume that you have no background knowledge in business or finance, and we try to level everybody up to I would say a reasonably sophisticated understanding of this field. We start out going through the nuts and bolts of business organizations, talking about the various entities that can be used in order to conduct business, including the sole proprietorship, the limited liability company, limited partnerships, partnerships and corporations. And we talk about how these entities are owned, managed, and operated. We look at their various characteristics and try to put you in a position where you could reasonably make a selection among those various ways of doing business if you yourself wanted to go into business. And if you're working for one of those organizations, put you in a position to really understand how they're governed and their rights and obligations of their various constituencies. And then in the second part of the course, we take those nuts and bolts, which are roughly equivalent to the business associations course that the JD students take as their introductory business law course, and put you in a position to take advanced courses by and large, by allowing you to satisfy that business associations prerequisite. So the second half of the course is really designed to take those nuts and bolts and apply them to various business-related professional fields. For example, things like business torts, valuation of businesses, choice of entity, non-competes, areas that I would think that, at some point, most of the students in the class will encounter. In terms of the workload, try to really reflect, the pressures that the students are under by giving you the essential readings in the area, using a multiplicity of tools to cover the material, including weekly problem sets that are not graded, but that I ask you to complete and that we talk about in class to test your knowledge so you can understand whether or not you're absorbing the material. Soft cold calling so that I don't put you on the spot, but I allow you to participate, and we do that in panels. So about 25%, I usually divide the class into 4 groups so you know when you're on call, but I don't ask you to do anything other than get us started and give you an opportunity to engage by participating. And finally, in terms of assessment, we have a midterm just to make sure you have those nuts and bolts covered. And then once you've completed the midterm about halfway through the course, I ask you to turn to a written assignment. The midterm, by the way, is all multiple choice. It's about 50 multiple choice questions that cover the entire first semester, first half of the first semester of the course. And then the second half allows you to choose a case, I hope, in your area of interest, and delve into a particular topic within the business law field. We have research assistants through the library. I basically ask you to do a 5 to 7 double-spaced page paper answering some specific questions focused on how, if you were in the business situation of the litigants, you might have done things differently, knowing what you have learned in the course.
And so Peter, going over to you to kind of answer some of the similar things that Aman just mentioned. And so the question posed is, what does like a week in the life look like for a student in your class? So what can they expect as far as what they need to do to prepare for the classes? And then what would be the experience in a class in any given week? And what are the assessments? And the assessments is just our, education's world fancy word of saying, assignments or like graded things. And so Peter, can you talk to those?
Right. Well, what I do, and typically, just as in Russell's and Iman's classes, I have a series of readings. They're typically cases. They're either excerpts from cases or entire cases. From U.S. Supreme Court decisions when we're talking about constitutional law. When we get into state constitutional law, there would be state constitutional cases. And then with the statutory area, for the most part, they're federal court cases. I generally assign somewhere between 30 to 50 pages a week. It's not too heavy, but I do approximately every 2.5 to 3 weeks, I have a quiz, which is just a true or false quiz. And there are 4 quizzes spread throughout the semester, and they test you essentially on objective knowledge coming out of the particular cases. So the holding in Marbury versus Madison was that judicial review is a proper function of the U.S. Supreme Court. So the answer there would be true. All those 4 quizzes, generally, there are 10 questions each. They add up to about 40%, usually 40% of the class. I also have a practice midterm, which is not graded, just to give people an idea of what the final is like. It's typically shorter questions with requiring short paragraph answers, analyzing a hypothetical fact situation that is similar to the kinds of cases that we've been going through. That's not graded, but then the final exam, which counts approximately 60%, is graded. And then in addition, I do give credit for class participation. Just like Professor Anantawi, I do kind of a soft cold calling. I'll generally ask for volunteers. I don't put people on the spot, but I usually have quite a bit of participation because the subject matter is interesting, right? Is it lawful to burn the flag? Well, that's something a lot of people want to talk about. And so we'll talk, if you want to talk about flag burning, my course is the course for you. I will once in a while, if I don't get responses, I'll ask a specific person, but it's if you're not prepared or you're not, for one reason you don't want to participate at that point, that's not held against you. So I use participation as a positive rather than as a negative. So those are that's the structure of the course and the kinds of assessments that I do.
So Aman, you kind of answered that question in your initial response, but is there anything else you wanted to tack on to your initial response?
Well, I do try to place people's performance, or outcomes in the students' hands. And so The multiple choice midterm is worth 30%, and I intentionally, make the written work, the final project, worth 60%, so that you have more control over your grade in terms of how much effort you put in. Some students perform differently on different types of assessments, so I want to give you a variety, an opportunity to just test student knowledge inventory with the midterm, and also, though, to give you some work writing practice, because writing is still an important skill. There are different kinds of writings, in business. That might be emails, short memos. I do want to give you an opportunity to write with that exercise, as well as do some research, and then 10% participation.
So a lot of our prospective students talk to us about their schedules and saying, I just never know when I'm going to be pulled into a board meeting last minute. I never know when I'm going to have to travel last minute for this week or whatnot. And what we always say is that the professors, are understanding that these are working professionals, but can you each talk to that? How flexible are you all for these types of situations? And can you give an example of what that might look like?
I'm extremely flexible with that, and exactly the kinds of scenarios that Jason mentioned do come up quite a bit. And so I do take attendance. If someone is never there in the class, that's a problem, but I'm very flexible. And what I do is, if someone can't come, I say, look, the classes are recorded, and please ask me any questions you'd like about the recording. And sometimes I'll set up a special session for a group of students who may have missed several classes, just to have them shoot questions at me, and the students do like to take advantage of that. So we're very flexible. I'm very flexible with regard to attendance. Obviously, participation I do count it. I count it not as a specific percentage, but sort of as a positive. So it's people who participate fairly consistently at a high level, I can bump their grade for half a grade. So say from a B+ to an A-, something like that. And typically, I'll give some kind of a participation bump to about 15% of the class, roughly, who participate pretty regularly. And I think one of the things we love about M.L.S. students is that they have so many work experiences that are so valuable and relevant to the material that we're talking about. So we really love for people to bring in hypothetical situations that are based on experiences they may have had managing a difficult personnel situation, administering a complicated contract, dealing with a discrimination issue or something that relates to the material of the class. And so I really like to give people that opportunity to talk about that and use their work experience as a plus, and not disadvantage them in any way because they may have to not be there for something important, because their experiences in work are really a valuable component for the rest of the class to learn. And we want people to go to those board meetings. We want people to go to those city council meetings where they're representing a city. We want students to bring all that in. And so rather than a question of disadvantage, that's really an asset. And so when people and I find people are fairly conscientious about attending class as much as they can. But if they can't attend class, we know it's for a good reason, and that adds to the sum total of the class's positive experience.
I would just add that in addition to the opportunities and flexibility that Peter ran through, I rely more on students to kind of self-regulate, so self-assessments through these quizzes that I ask them to take. And I can see both sides. I think some students really do prefer mandatory weekly or monthly quizzes, and I haven't done that. I've relied really on students to pace themselves, and so there's some flexibility. And I think there are some benefits to having different professors use different techniques so that you're not having 2 quizzes a week, for example.
Fantastic. Thank you both for sharing. I'm sure that relieved the anxiety of people here who are all in that same boat. So the next question is actually one I'll just answer, and then either the professors can jump in if they want to add anything. But the question is generally about grading and how grading kind of works for these classes and for the program generally. And first of all, there's a lot of, this is actually a frequently asked question, how the grading works, because a lot of people have these stigmas about how hard, JD grading is, and strict curve, and everyone's competing against each other on that curve. And so that this Master of Legal Studies program is different in that sense, in that we are a UCLA Graduate Division Master's program, and so we're under what we call the UCLA Graduate Division grading standard, which is different from JD, which means that there's no curve, so people are not strictly competing against one another for jostling for position on that curve. Instead, the curve is not curved, but the standard is essentially that students get A's and B's in most instances, and you have to really earn it to get lower than that. But no, it's not a situation where everyone gets A's. Certainly not. You have to work for it. It's a challenging program, as you'd imagine a program at UCLA School of Law would be. But that's generally what you can kind of expect. Peter and Aman, do you want to elaborate on that at all?
I follow the system that Jason is describing. I mean, I would typically about half A's and half B's, and of the B's, the vast majority, overwhelming majority of them, of those B's are B pluses, because I'm really not there. We're not here to screen people out in any sense, but to reward them for their work and evaluate them based on their work. I just want to throw in something from just the last session about quizzes. I do give quizzes, and Professor Korobkin gives quizzes, but I schedule my quizzes so they're not taking two quizzes the same week. So I really try to stagger that. We make sure that that's not too much of a burden. But back to grading, I think that A's and A pluses, obviously you earn them, particularly A pluses. We don't give too many of those, but a lot of my students do extremely well. They're stimulated by the class, and I think I find if a B, not too many people get B's. Most people are going to get within the B range. They're going to get a B plus. So my idea is to encourage people rather than to screen them.
I would just add, thank you, Peter. I would just add that there's a perception in that law school is about, at least the first year, the 1L year of law school, is about hiding the ball and having students try to find it. And I would say we don't do. I don't want to speak for my colleagues in the program, but I don't do it. I want everybody to see everything clearly and work on the nuances and get to a level of sophistication they really couldn't arrive at either by self-study or really just exposure outside of the classroom. And so, that's really what we're about. We're about transmitting and transferring learning to the students that's going to be really valuable to helping them take the next step in their careers.
Thanks so much. And then, so as my last question to you both, it's talking a little bit outside the context of any specific class, but why do you think someone who isn't a lawyer and is thinking about a Master of Legal Studies program, why do you think it would be a good idea for someone to do a Master of Legal Studies program, and which includes your class, of course, but then just in general, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that one of our goals in this program is to create better clients, better business people, better institutional actors in all varieties of professional careers. And when I was a practicing lawyer a litigator in downtown LA, I did a lot of work in employment law. I did some environmental law, and I was constantly dealing with people in various businesses, various clients who were asking me questions about what they should do in a given situation. And I think that there is a lot of advice that I gave them, which, although valuable, they could have had or known before they talked to a lawyer. So take the personnel issue specifically. I mean, I counsel a lot of personnel people about how to handle a problematic situation, what to do, what not to do. And these are things where I frankly think that they probably didn't need to go to a lawyer as much as they did. And I think that knowing something about the law, the potential liability that the business would have, the solutions that could be worked out, I think there's a lot of space between the client and the lawyer, which could be occupied by the client. And I think it's in the interest of law firms only to deal with cases where it's absolutely necessary to, as Dickens would say, take the matter to law. A lot of problems can be solved without necessarily litigating. And so I think that this program, I see this program as an opportunity for business and government professionals and nonprofit professionals to know more about the legal field and perhaps avoid using lawyers and litigation as much as they currently do, and also make themselves more valuable within their own professional context. And I've done pro bono environmental cases, and I've worked quite a bit with people that were, if you remember the movie Aaron Brockovich, who did research as investigative paralegals and who often created a case in a factual sense to a greater extent than the lawyers did. And I love sort of promoting people taking charge of their professional situation and learning how to deal with the law and without necessarily having to go to an expert and ask a question all the time. So I think that my goal is to make the workplace more proactive and more competent, and not have the lawyer the kind of fix-it guy who just a person who comes in to solve a problem. Perhaps limit that role, and I think society would be better off in that sense as well. So I love our students going out, and I've already heard from some of them of how they're solving problems, and we want to see more of that. And I think that's a reason why anyone who's not a lawyer may want to be in this join this program.
We do get feedback from students while they're taking the course and after they have left the courses that they've had these occasions to use the tools, the learning that we've given them to great value. And so that really, we're enthusiastic about that. I practiced law by way of background I practiced corporate law, general corporate law for almost 10 years at a local big law firm, and worked in mergers and acquisitions as well. And these, what we try to convey, we want to put you in a position where you're protecting yourselves to the extent you can. Before you have a dispute, because disputes are inevitable and they're going to arise, but you can put yourself in the best position possible to try to negotiate your way out of going to court, just because you have a strong position and you can make the other side aware of that. But you can't do that if you haven't really done some planning and created some strategic benefit to yourself in the process, and just being able to identify issues that just weren't even on your radar screen is a huge benefit. So I think that we provide a lot of value. We don't always know exactly how it's going to surface, but we're confident from the feedback we get and our own experiences that the year is well worth your time and effort.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to turn it over to all the attendees to ask any questions they might want to have answered. This is a perfect time to go to that Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom screen there and enter any questions you might have, and then I'll be able to moderate those questions. So the first question that we have in are, so what are some of the qualities that you look for in papers? So for example, demonstrate an understanding of case law, concise writing, etc. So do either of you kind of want to talk about that?
I'm going to punt to Iman on that because my class is exam-based, is quiz and exam-based. So I can talk about writing generally. I think we want clear, concise writing that makes reference to the course material, so the cases that we've studied, and applies them to new fact situations. But if we're talking specifically about papers, I'd punt on that because my class doesn't use papers. But so.
Well, I think sometimes the best writing is really comes into play when you're responding to an essay exam question, because you do need to be organized and concise, and you need to help your professor find your answer. It shouldn't be buried. I tried to provide some guiding questions for your case study, which it's going to require you to first understand the facts of the case, understand some of the background about the case, that is how it arose, and understand the perspectives of the different sides. That's something we really work hard for our JD students to understand. We want them to be able to see problems from different perspectives, because if they can't see how the other side is thinking, they're not going to be effective in negotiations or even in litigation. Because the questions a judge is going to ask them, or the other side is going to raise, they should have anticipated, frankly. And so, I want you to see the different litigating positions, look at their strengths, and then finally, I want you to ask yourself, gee, how could they have put themselves? How could the losing party have put themselves in a stronger litigating position in terms of just writing? I don't grade you on style. I do comment on style, and I keep the paper short enough, that it's got parts, so it's hard to go really off base. But I do definitely value clear, concise, and well-organized writing that answers the question. You'd be surprised how many students in other courses somehow are able to write a lot, but never answer the question.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing. And so students, when entering into our program, will receive a full law school fundamentals series, is what we call it. And so that'll be a series of sessions that are devoted to a specific skill that we think is valuable in law school. So such as briefing cases, writing for exam, these types of things that'll help shore you up with the knowledge of how to be a good law student before you even enter into the classroom starting in the fall semester. And then of course you'll continue to improve and hone when you get these professors and their feedback, the valuable feedback that they'll give you as well. And so those are some things you can expect. And then also in your second semester, in the spring semester, there's also a class called Legal Analysis and Communications, which is specific to the analyzing and communicating and how to do that in a more sophisticated manner as a legal analyst. And so that's some other things you can expect. Thank you so much for coming today. Really appreciate you taking the time to learn more about our Master of Legal Studies program here at UCLA School of Law. As mentioned in the beginning, April 25th is the general application deadline for the program to be starting in the classes in this late August. So thank you again for coming, and hope you have a great rest of your day.